So let's talk about the things that you can incorporate into your warm-ups for a workout after you've had a C-section. So the first thing is going to be scar mobilization. So what happens at your incision site is those tissues can sometimes adhere to one another or stick to one another as it's in the healing process. So there's different layers of tissue and skin and muscle that are all stacked on top of one another that normally glide very smoothly. But when we have damage to the tissue, such as that incision, sometimes during the healing process, they can get sticky and stick to one another. So doing scar mobilization can help loosen up those adhesions so the layers glide more smoothly again. So why do we want to do scar mobilization? So essentially what can happen is after you've had a C-section at that incision site, if the tissues are sticking to one another, it can cause you to be in this more flexed position. So you may like arch in the back a little bit more because everything's kind of pulling you this way. So the low back is shortened, the hip flexors are shortened. And so when we try to find extension, it may be more challenging because all this tissue here is pulling us down a little bit more. So doing scar mobilization can release those adhesions, especially before workouts, so that we can find that extension at the top of our squats, at the top of our deadlifts, or any sort of hip extension type movement. So how do we want to do scar mobilization? So you can start away from the abdomen or away from the incision site. So we can do small circles. You can move the skin up and down, side to side, and then gradually get closer to the incision site. At the incision site, you can do, again, those little circles. You can move the tissue side to side, up and down, or you can even pinch and lift and then wiggle it. We want to do different levels of depth. So first, we want to just move the superficial tissue around. So you can see that just my skin is moving here. Then we want to move the actual muscle around, so muscle onto bone. And then for the abdomen, we want to move into a visceral level, so moving so that we're touching the organs and moving those organs around. We want to ensure that we're not guarding or gripping, so we're not in a position that is causing us to flex in the abdomen, because then it's going to be very challenging to get to that deepest level. And you want to find these gradually, so starting away from the abdomen or the incision site at first, starting chest with the tissue or the superficial layer, getting a little bit deeper to the muscle, and then over time moving to the visceral level so that it's not just all in one day, it is over a few weeks. The next thing that we want to do is we want to focus on hip flexor mobility. So again, if we're stuck in this position all the time, the hip flexors are going to be shortened, and that's also going to contribute towards a challenging hip extension. So for hip flexor mobility, we have a few options. The first one is going to be from this half kneeling position. We want to think tuck the butt underneath and then drive the hips forward. This is going to lengthen the hip flexor and allow us to stretch it. Now from here, we have another option. We can extend the arm up and then lean away from it. So this is going to increase the length and increase the intensity of the stretch. And then you also have the option to try to open up with it. So this is really going to lengthen that area around. Another thing that you can add is you can actually add in that scar mobilization either with the arm extended or down here. So tuck the butt underneath, drive the hips forward, and then you can even mobilize in this position down here. The next thing that we want to incorporate into our warm-ups is going to be cross-body type movements. So this is going to help us reestablish that neuromuscular connection across that incision site. So we want the upper body and the lower body to be meeting in the center. So I have this side of my upper body, this side of my lower body. They're going to cross and come towards midline. I could add to it by having my hand press into the opposite knee. So I'm going to come and press into that knee. So the knee is both driving in and I'm pushing here. So this is going to establish that connection across that incision site by activating the anterior oblique sling, which runs from this chest, this oblique across the front of the pubic symphysis where the incision site is to that opposite adductor. So we have this cross body pattern here. So this hand is coming, driving into this knee, and then come back. Exhale, press, and then you can switch sides. Exhale, press. So the other option is to come down onto the floor if we want to regress this movement. So you can start from a supine position. Opposite hand, opposite leg are going to come up and press into one another. So I'm active in this leg, active in this foot, and then really think drive that knee up as I press at the same time, and then switch. And then if I want to make this more challenging, I can come into a bridge position. So opposite hand, opposite knee, press, and then switch sides. So things that you can incorporate into your warm-ups before a workout after you've had a C-section include scar mobilization and hip flexor mobility. So that's going to help you come from this flexed position to be able to extend fully in the hip and find a more neutral spine. And the last thing we want to incorporate is cross-body movement. So opposite sides coming and pressing towards one another, crossing that incision site, activating that anterior oblique sling from the chest oblique to that opposite adductor, which is going to help to establish that neuromuscular connection. And hopefully these tips will help you feel stronger in your workouts after you've had a C-section.